everyone. And thank you so much for giving up part of your Saturday morning to be here with us at PennTESOL East for our first second Saturday seminar of the 2024-2025 school year. Um, we have a great series planned for you for the entire school year, starting in October and ending in June, the second Saturday of every month. Of course, the second Saturday of November, we won't have one because hopefully you'll all be with us at Franklin Learning Center for our fall conference. And in May, we won't have one because we will be having another conference, our spring conference. So, please make sure to register for the conference if you haven't already. And we are looking forward to seeing you there. Today, we have our fantastic Kathy Bell, and it is my absolute honor to introduce her today. I have known Kathy for quite some time, and she is truly one of the best teachers I know. She has experience as an administrator in an elementary school, as the principal, right, Kathy? And
Elementary and middle school, yeah.
elementary and middle school principal, and has many, many years of TESOL experience teaching a wide variety of populations. But today she is going to talk about those who come from dextro-sinistro writing systems, those that go from right to left, and some of the tips that she has for us to teach them reading and writing. So without further ado, I give you Kathy Bell presenting from right to left to right, teaching reading and writing to beginners.
Good morning, everybody. And yes, thank you for being here. Bill is all too kind. I am simply a practitioner, and I'm proud of being a practitioner. I'm not a neuroscientist. I am not anything other than a teacher, and that's one of the reasons I went out of administration to back into the classroom. So I'm at a point in my life right now that I have taught in a regular classroom for 25 years. And now I equal that in teaching TESOL for 25 years. So you do the math. So anyway, I want to talk about all these many people that we get to meet. We have the privilege of meeting from around the world, but especially the ones that have to change how they're reading and how they're writing. However, there are a few such students. Are we getting some background?
Yes.
Okay, how can we rectify that, Bill?
It was just for a second. I think it's okay. If anyone is
Okay.
unmuted, if everyone can make sure that they are muted, that can help as well.
Okay, thank you. But there are some places where people in our classrooms are doing both in their country. Right now, I have a student who, on a bus, she'll see left to right because of French, and she'll see right to left because of Arabic. So imagine growing up in a culture with both. Maybe some of you have. Are there any of you here who already are from a dextro-sinistral group? And
Kathy,
yes.
I grew up with Arabic and English, learning them all at the same time since preschool.
Since preschool. So
Arabic,
you're from,
English, and French, yes.
yes. So you saw that probably on some buses and signs and posters and things like that. Yes.
Yes.
And then English, you just went into the French side for a while, and then here came English then. Okay, wonderful. Okay, Helen, I didn't remember that from our past together. Okay, um, as a practitioner, I've observed many things, and my first master's degree was in education and administration, regular education, and that was those years in a regular school. And then I went into TESOL and I got that master's degree too. And then I noticed there are a lot of overlaps, and those overlaps are important in both situations. Now, uh, we're going to talk about a little bit about some things that our students come with before we get into too many of the ways that we can actually teach these students. And I want to hear your ideas too, because by no means do I consider myself the answer to everything. I want your input as well. So, Bill, can we go to that next slide, please? And let's look at some of these languages. All right. I understand this is not everything. And from what I read, there are 15 kinds of Arabic out there. I've seen that in the classroom where students, share different words that they have in Arabic as well. The first three listed here are the most popular, I'm told. All right. But in the classroom that you're teaching in now, if you're teaching, or if you're administrating, about how many of these languages do you see or do you know of in your students? About how many? For me, it's about 6 that I see.
Wow.
So that we've seen from time to time.
Urdu and Arabic.
Okay.
And
So there
Pashto.
are 4 or 5 of them for me.
Yeah. Okay. Now, some students come with 2 or 3 of these, and they'll tell you 2 or 3. And then all of a sudden, they're coming into English now, and those other languages that have been from our right to left are now, they have to dwell in English. And some had no choice but to be here in the United States, as we know. Okay, well, we're going to talk about a couple of different things that all of our students come with that deal with the brain a little bit before we move on. So let's go to the next slide, Bill, please. Okay, now you've heard that people might be left brain or right brain. That was very popular in the 60s and 70s because of a Nobel Prize winner named Roger Sperry. And everybody believed it. But then later on, I don't know if you know this, later on, about 2013 or more, a more scientific study happened where with the MRIs, about 1,000, let me see. Yeah, 1,000 people, MRIs were done on the brains of 1,000 people. And it revealed that the brain doesn't favor one side over the other. People might favor one side over the other, where we might say, I really like the arts or music or something like that. So we might go to that other side. Now, what I have found with so many of my students that come from Middle East, they don't seem to sing as much. They might not play an instrument as much, but they've been told to, stick with mathematics, stick with finance, and things like that. So sometimes it seems as though students might have had an interest in some of the arts or imagination and daydreaming and things like that, but they weren't allowed. And we've seen that with some Asian countries as well. So this could be any of our students. How about you? Do you consider yourself more left or right? Just speak out. What do you favor?
I think I'm more left brain because even though mathematics is in there, but I do like to think, like put my stuff down on paper, and I need to see it spaced out so that I can actually form a plan and then go to the next step.
Uh-huh. Okay. And how about others? Everybody's shy today?
I will put
No,
myself.
I'm not shy. I'm not shy. I'm on the right side. I'm more imaginative, more holistic. I'm not great at math, but I am very logical. So maybe a combination.
Okay. Okay. And Bill, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think that My love for morphology and syntax over sociolinguistics puts me on the left.
Yeah, I would have done that with you as well. Well, the thing is, what this study found, or what these, it was actually a team of neuroscientists. What they found is that both sides of the brain are in use, and there is this bundle. There are these bundles of nerve fibers that is like an information highway going between the hemispheres. So if we favor something, we're gonna dwell on it. If I want to paint beautiful pictures, I'm going to dwell on that and I'm going to get better in that. I didn't like math either, and so many English teachers won't put themselves on the left side because they'll say, I don't like math, that's why I majored in English or something like that. But that really has nothing to do with it as much anymore. It's what we favor. So our students come with maybe what they favored, or maybe they didn't. Their parents favored it and kind of pushed them into that. So I'm saying these things to just keep us aware of other things that are going on in the minds of our students. And then when we now set them down and they have to do everything from the right to the left, and that's not just mental, that's also physical. We know that we have a lot of muscles in our face, and we think about that with pronunciation, but it's with our eyes, and students get tired. And those that are having to change their direction, they're even getting more tired. Do students ever tell you in the first week, I am really tired? I've never been in English so much. And beginners won't say it quite as clearly, but that's what they're saying. And then when we add in the physical part of it, that they've had to do this movement as well, it even adds in more of that. Okay, let's go now to the next part. But before I get into this, let's wait. Bill, let's go back to the left right. Can you go back? Yeah, thank you. Let's sit here a moment. What about students who come and they might tell you, or you might ask them, did anybody change your handedness? Now, that used to happen in the United States, like maybe the 50s and earlier. But now you don't hear that so much anymore. But it still happens in some cultures. And I've had students say, I think something like that happened to me. I seem to remember something. And if they really remember, it might have been from a more drastic situation where people used to bind the left hand so that they couldn't use it at all, especially when eating or something like that. But anyway, this still happens, and students can come to a classroom and now have to deal with directionality change, but they've already been changed in something, and then it becomes even harder because that kind of thing does affect the person, and it does affect the brain. What about mixed directionality? How many of you have a mixed dominance? Do any of you have mixed dominance? I do. I'm right-handed and I'm right-footed now. In sports, I was both, but I'm right-handed now, but I'm left-eyed. So my dominance is mixed, and that is supposed to affect reading somewhat. And maybe it did. I'm an average reader. Maybe I could have been a fantastic reader, maybe a speed reader or something. Are any of you mixed dominance? Anybody? Did you ever check your eyes?
Know what it means to be right-eyed or eye dominant.
Okay, let's think about eye dominant. Can you see me? Can you all see me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Now, if you take a pencil or a pen or something long, and you see a line ahead of you, like a corner of a wall, like where the two walls come together, and with both eyes, line up the pencil with that line. Line it up with both eyes open. Okay, it's a little hard to do, but not that hard. And if I close my left eye, the right eye will keep it still. That's my dominant eye. But if I close my right eye and leave my left eye open, it will move because my left eye, or actually my left eye is dominant and my right eye is not dominant. It will move when I close my left eye because my right eye is not controlling my sight. My left eye is controlling it. Sherry, you're muted if you wanted to say something.
I said, I'm going to ask all my friends to do that. That's so cool.
Yeah. But anyway, it does affect learning. And so then we have students that are probably mixed dominant as well, some that are and some that aren't. And then this all adds to what we see in the classroom. All right, then what about, there's one other thing I want to mention, and we're going to see more of this, I think, for a while. We know that our world is in great conflict all over. I was told there are about 49, maybe more, places in this world that have conflict, serious conflict going on. It might be between tribes, it might be between countries, where there is harm being done. Now, we know that we have quite a group of people who have come in more recent years, maybe not because they wanted to be here, they had to come. And we saw pictures in the news and so forth being crowded into planes. We've met people who've been on that, even who have been on that last plane that made it from Afghanistan and other places. They have seen trauma. They have seen difficulties. And PTSD shows up at different times. And studies have been done with PTSD, with people with PTSD. In fact, I'll cite one of them. It was done with, I don't know how many. It was, let's see. No, I don't have the number, but with quite a few military men and women who had PTSD or have PTSD, and they found that it was directly related to, well, depression, of course, and we see depression sometimes in our classrooms, learning impairment, including impaired memory and vocabulary. And here we are trying to teach language to people who may have gone through serious trauma. In that list at the beginning that we had up, you might have noticed Rohingya on that list. Okay, thank you, Bill. Rohingya. We had a Rohingya young man live with us for a couple of years. He was doing a couple years of high school. And he had such a difficult time learning. Once he learned enough of the language to survive here, he was done. As far as learning higher levels, no, that just wasn't going to happen. And it wasn't just because of choice. He wasn't able to remember things. And we don't know the degree to which the traumas that he went through were. He didn't want to talk about them. And also, a lot of times it's suppressed, and we were told not to dig. And then when he turned 18, then no longer could he be put under any kind of doctor's care because now it's his own choice. But he still stays in touch with us and comes to visit and so forth. And yeah, so life is difficult for him in some ways. Now, let's move on now to the next part, which is that third situation, dyslexia in teens and adults. Bill probably remembers when we had that deluge of students from the Middle East come, and we had a lot of low-level students from one country in particular. And all of a sudden, it seemed like I was seeing very familiar things that I had seen in regular classrooms or in the school where I spent a lot of time before I came to Temple. And that was students with hints of dyslexia or soft areas of, certain learning disabilities. And we had uh, therapists who worked with these students. We didn't have the real strong areas, where students, had to be out of the classroom all day or anything like that. No, just soft areas. And the therapists that we had working with them, they would come to our classrooms and give us a lot of ideas of what to do. Now we have to be careful with the word dyslexia because sometimes it's like that garbage can word. Oh, he, reversed his B and D, so he must be dyslexic. Well, probably not. Maybe he was just taught wrong, or maybe he was taught both at the same time, and we know that can cause a lot of mix up. Just like when we might teach 2, 2, and 2 all at the same time, we're guaranteeing that it's going to be mixed up a little bit. We should teach certain things separated from each other. But anyway, it still might be a sign. It might be just a little hint. Let's look at these symptoms of common dyslexia. These are some of the regular symptoms, and I saw these with so many of my students, and I still do when I get people from certain parts of the world in the beginning classes. Difficulty reading, including reading out loud. Those of you who have taught beginners, you've seen that. You've seen where there's this difficulty. I have one right now who she will kind of gasp. It's like, to get it out. And some of that might be because she's trying so hard, but it might not be. Then we have slow and labor-intensive reading and writing. How about the writing of your students who are from R2L writing systems? How gorgeous is their writing? Is it good? Is it up and down, off the line, below the line, above the line? Does it look like they did it on the subway? Some of them, and some of them are very good too. We've had students that have been from different countries, and they've said they've done a lot of practicing before coming. Okay, so again, there's that practice. Practice makes perfect. Well, practice makes better, never makes perfect. So we work on having more practice for them. Do any of you teach handwriting to teens or adults? I'm curious about that. Do any of you teach it?
No,
No. Are you tempted to?
no.
Okay. All right. Well, I try something from time to time with some of my students. I had when I have Arabic students, Arabic speakers, or other speakers who come from handwriting systems that are very beautiful. I mean, I think Arabic is beautiful when it's written. It's flowing, and it has all kinds of little loops and different things. In fact, I have some hanging on my wall where somebody did a needlepoint, and it's beautiful. And then suddenly they start writing English that looks like this. It looks like drawing. It looks like drawing stick figures. And we expect them to be able to do it. And they don't know from which side to do it. Excuse me. They'll start a C from the bottom and go up, or any which way, or an E from the bottom and go around. And sometimes we don't care. Excuse me a moment, I have to cough. Okay, I'm getting over a cold. I often give my students this paper that also has the cursive writing on it. And I've had a couple of Arabic students, one in particular, who took that to heart. And he is now a beautiful handwriter because the flowingness, the way he flowed with Arabic, his Arabic was beautiful. He turned it into, or he used that same skill with writing cursive style. Now, some people will say, well, nobody's teaching cursive style anymore. Well, that might be just in our world, because every single student that I have in my classroom right now can write cursive style. But I don't have any Arabic students right now in my class, except one who has French and Arabic. So she already knew how to write cursive style in her system from her country. So how about you? Are your students, what are you seeing with the handwriting? I'm interested in what you're seeing.
I see the same thing that you see, Kathy, with like sometimes the letter E, they start from the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And but I had never thought until you said this that for students whose native handwriting flows, that maybe writing in cursive in English might be easier for them than printing.
Yeah. Well, and I know in my classroom, I don't have time to teach them. There isn't that time. But anyway, like on this piece of paper, you probably can't see it. It has little red arrows, and it tells where to start, and it tells which direction to go in. And when I was at the other school where we had kids, American kids with some of these kind of difficulties, that was one of the things that the therapist dwelled on, teaching them the right way to go, which direction to make their letters, and to learn that from the get-go. So I don't know if we're missing something here, or if it's just something to let the student take charge of when I give them that paper, or you give them a paper. Now, the next one, problems with spelling. You see that? Do you see that with the beginners from the R to L systems? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have problems with spelling myself, so I always use that as a way for students to encourage students to make mistakes and just move on.
Okay. Rania, that's me too. Or Rhea, how do you say your name? Rhea?
It's Raya.
Rhea, it's beautiful.
Thank
All right.
you.
Yeah, me too. I'll tell my students, okay, when I had to memorize a list, okay, I could memorize a list, but don't ask me to spell it the next week, depending on what it was. So I'll tell them I'm a B speller, and I'll tell them, check my spelling, check it. And sometimes I'll even fake it, too. And I'll say, oh, check my spelling. Is it an E? Is it an I? Or an A? And some students really like that. They grab their phone and they check it, and they'll say it. And if somebody already knows it and says it, they like that too. So they yes, it encourages them, and it gets them to look at it more closely. Now, let's see. Okay, I see some chat coming up, but I can't quite read it all. But I'm sorry if it seems like I'm ignoring it. It's more me not being able to see it well. Okay. Have you ever seen a student write something, a beginner, and they'll start writing, and they'll write maybe 2 letters, and then they move their hand and they go back too far, and now they write from the right to the left the next couple letters, and then they move their hand and go back and finish the word. I've seen that. I've seen it at the not chalkboard. I've seen that at the whiteboard when I often ask students to go up and put their sentence on the board, or to do something, and I've seen that happen up there too. And when I see it, I usually point it out to them, and I'll tell them what they just did, and I understand why. You're getting used to a different direction. It's not easy to do. And you're changing it, and then other students hear that are around that person, and they start to learn that, okay, my classmate is also having to change their direction of writing and reading. And that's very healthy, because when a person understands themselves and they understand their classmates, I believe that increases respect. And that makes a person more comfortable, I think, in their classroom. Somebody said, I saw something down there about your favorite mistake was from a Japanese student. Who had that down there?
That was me.
Tell us.
Yeah, it's slightly unrelated because it was more of an RL thing. Which
But see, that's okay. Some of this we need to understand for all of our students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the story was, when I was teaching in Japan, I had them write 3 sentences about what they did over the weekend. And the student said that he went to liver work. And I had to think really hard, what could liver work be? It turns out he went to the mall near our school called Riverwalk.
Oh.
Push the R in the L.
There's an RL. Okay. Yeah, that is cute. Okay. Now, with what I said about the one who was spelling, or some of the students who, all of a sudden in the middle of a word, they're changing it, it also happens with reading. I've seen readers go from one line to the other line and start from the other end and suddenly be very confused until they realize what they just did. That is often something that happens with beginners, and sometimes we don't even know that it's happening. And I suspect it happens more than what I see, so that we have to give them a little more time to straighten it out. Unfortunately, we often have students that are entirely too helpful, and right away they're telling them what the next word is. We have to, do our best as teachers to get the students to give their classmates a chance. They just need a little more time to get back on target. And it might be that direction, or it might just be they don't know which end of the word to start with.
May I
All
ask
right.
a question about that?
Yes.
Okay, so I have that problem in class, and I don't know if it's because of schools in their mother country, but a lot of times students seem to strive for perfection instead
Oh,
of just giving me the answer or doing the reading. And one part of it, I just want the students to find their voice and actually do the reading so that they can hear themselves in English, and then we'll go back later for the mistakes. But then the other class seems to jump in and say, "Oh, no, 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 it's this way," which then makes the student who's doing the reading or the writing kind of shrink back. And then it's like, oh, I'm starting all over again for development. So I say all that to say, how do you combat the students in class who think they're being helpful when they're really not?
what age group do you teach?
I teach adults.
You teach adults also. Okay. Um, I usually start out whenever I have a reading class, especially, I'll tell the students there are certain things that we have to abide by in that classroom, and one of them is not to hurt each other. And when they say hurt, I don't want to hurt anybody. And I'll say, well, you can. If you give somebody an answer too quickly or give them a word too quickly, you hold them down. You are not giving them a chance to work on it. Okay. And you give them a little bit of time and you'll see that they might get it. Okay. And if they don't, I usually come in with it. But they usually catch on to that, because then when I see them actually get it, I'll say, yep, all you needed was a little time. And your classmates helped you by being quiet. However, we probably read a little more in small groups. It might be 2 or 3 together. It might just be 2 together. And that's a little hard because as a teacher, I have to go flying around from one group to the other, but that's okay. I think that's a little less embarrassment too. Now,
Okay, I'll try that.
It's not perfect. It's not
Right.
perfect. Okay. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. So what we try might not be enough. And I hope that other people will chime in with some other ideas as well. But let's move on to, okay, of course they're going to avoid activities that involve reading. I mean, how many students really want to do a crossword puzzle? Okay. Not too many from this category until they get really good at it, or a word search, or just the homework that involves reading you might say it's a really fun story and you're going to enjoy it. Well, they might not, and they might avoid it, and they might just ask somebody, what was it about? Then the next part, mispronouncing names or words. Now, I have trouble with mispronouncing names sometimes too. And I think, Rhea, I think I mispronounced your name right at the beginning too. Or problems retrieving words. Now, I hear that a lot, but it might just be how much time they've spent on memorizing. Or it might be somebody who's come from that part of the world that has had a lot of trauma, and we might not see the PTSD yet, but it might be coming. Or it might just be they're living, in pre-PTSD, or they might not ever, it might not ever evolve, but there's still that trauma there too, which interferes with this. Okay. Then spending an unusually long time completing tasks that involve reading or writing. My one student that's from a world like this takes 30 minutes longer than everybody else on a test. And there are times where I've had to stop her and ask her to stay after. I'll let you finish after class because we needed to get on to something else, or a quiz or something like that. Now, this next one, difficulty summarizing a story. I see that a lot. And sometimes I suspect they didn't do their homework, but it might not be. I shouldn't be so quick to suspect that. It may be that they just haven't had enough practice yet in English, that they need a little more time. And many times they'll go right to the end of the story, how it ended, and miss a whole lot of things from the middle. We do a little thing in my classes from time to time, and you probably have done this too, where you put the students in a couple of groups and one person starts, you pick out who's going to start and which way you're going to go in the circle. And the first person in each group starts retelling the story from the beginning. And then after a little bit of time, you say change, and it goes to the next person. And they're supposed to continue where the first person left off. And a little bit of time, and you say change, and you do it again. There are times where a student will go right to the end of the story, and other students are saying, no, you skipped too much. Or they just say pass for some reason. Did they do their homework, or are they just afraid that they can't do it in order? Okay. It's a fun activity if everybody can do it, but sometimes it's a very difficult activity for certain ones. Then, of course, the next one, trouble learning a foreign language. Well, go figure. And then the last one, difficulty doing math word problems. I don't do math word problems with students, but maybe we should. Maybe we should. We've had a lot of students. Um, okay, we've had a lot of students who have had uh, who have lived at our house. I was trying to read a chat at the same time I'm talking. I shouldn't do that.
Kathy, I will ask you the questions in the chat at the end.
Okay.
I got it for you.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right.
Well, I want to finish listening to it. It's probably 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay. We've had a number of students live at our house who have been students, and then they've gone on to community college. And the first test they failed was a math test. And they've been excellent in math all their lives because they couldn't do the word problems. And I don't know, we should have a chapter that deals with the word problems. I don't know. And one thing that some of them have failed a test for is because the teacher had written on the test, show your work. Well, that sounds so logical to us, but we've had some very good students, and one right now is in finance with 2 master's degrees, and he failed his first math test because it said show your work, and he didn't know what that meant. He thought that meant show the answers. And you and I would say, of course it means to show all the stuff you did. Well, no, I've had 2 students like that who failed their first test. And this man, who's very intelligent, got a C in Introductory to Mathematics. And, he was very embarrassed about that for a while, but now he kind of laughs about it. But anyway, okay, let's, quickly here think about some of the other things we do in the classroom. I've mentioned a couple, but what about resistance? I make my students write with pencil. Okay, there's some resistance on the paper with pencil. I also like them to erase mistakes, not just scratch them out. If I was a math teacher, perhaps I would I would say pen because I want to see the mistake you made, but I'm not, and I don't think I ever will be again. I used to like writing on a chalkboard because there was resistance, but there are allergies, and Bill told me that it's really bad for technology, all the dust. And it's funny that he made these wonderful slides for me, and there's a chalkboard. Okay, so well, anything that hold. Okay, let me go back on something. Kindergarten student might be given a little piece of light sandpaper and draw the letters on sandpaper and feel that, because the nerves in our fingers connect, go up our arms and connect to our brains, and they help to teach us. I use a lot of colored markers now on these whiteboards, hoping that students will, maybe the color will help as well. And then there's a very simple thing that we might do as teachers that we could be hurting the students or we could be helping them. When you point to a word at the board, where do you point? You just point at the word, just willy-nilly, anywhere? Or do you point at that first letter and let your finger go across? It's very important to point at the beginning of the word or at the beginning of the sentence. And then there's those things we used to do maybe with our own kids. If you are parents, you would have your children use their finger and read as they are reading, or point with their finger while you're reading to them. And I've asked my students to do that from time to time, or give them a note card where they could follow from line to line to line. And that's with any student. Okay. Um, okay. Many of our students come from places where they learn experientially. They learn from doing and so forth. We've gotten better at that in the United States. And I think many of us in our classrooms get the students out of their seats or to go outside and find something or do something as much as we can. I know there's always that time restraint. But when they come from a system that is so experiential to a system that might be locked into textbooks, it can be quite different for them too. And in many of these countries where these languages come from, it's like that. And there's one more thing I want to say to you, and then I want to bring it up. I want you to tell me some things, and that is a reading way that a teacher can do, and I just call it stop reading, stop in quotes, where you take the story and I read it, and they're to follow along, and then I stop somewhere, and they have to fill in that word that I stopped at. And I can tell very quickly who's following along. And then I'll read further and I stop, they say the next word. I go on, stop. You get the idea. Sometimes it's a whole phrase I want them to say. If I stop at all the prepositional phrases and they have to say the whole phrase. And then I'll do it faster. Students need to learn to read faster. That's one of the complaints that I hear when students get into the university. The reading load sometimes is too much for them to finish. And it might have been hard for us too. And we understand that. And now coming from different languages and now many from the right to left systems, it gets harder and harder. Okay, well, what about you? And with some of these questions that might come up, Bill, other people can answer them. I do not claim to be anything more than a practitioner that have observed a lot of things. So
Would you
let's
like
hear
me
them.
to ask you the first question from the chat now?
Yeah, let's go for it. Or if anybody wants to add in another idea of what to do.
All right. So I have a question from Manisha. She says, I totally think that many early literacy problems stem from dyslexia, but executive function controls almost all these aspects of reading and interferes with reading the same way. How do we tell the two causes apart?
Manisha, say yes.
Hi, Kathy.
Okay, Manisha, you're going to have to answer that question.
Dang it. I asked the question and I answer it. That's not fair.
No, it is fair because Dr. Kerr, you are able to answer that question better than Kathy Bell. You go right ahead.
No, I don't really know the answer, Kathy, to be honest. It's very, very difficult to determine if it is just word level problems, maybe that's mostly dyslexia. But then dyslexia becomes very complicated, it sort of interferes with almost everything that we know about reading and writing. So the more I read, the more confusing it gets. It's just that's where I am. But that differentiation is very important because then if the diagnosis is right, then the treatment is right, right? So we don't really know at this point of time. So that was a very, very genuine question.
Yes, I hear you. But a lot of this, what it's saying, dyslexia in teens, adults, that's not saying our right to left writers that come from those systems, that's not to say they have dyslexia. They're showing the same symptoms, at least at first.
Yeah.
And we see that in the beginners. And for us to be able to tell the difference with beginners from those countries who can't explain much to us yet, that's pretty hard. And we've seen some of the beginners go all the way through, even to get their PhDs. So obviously the practice was enough and so forth. But with people who have, not a real severe dyslexia problem, once they learn some personal strategies, it can go all the way through too. So let's move on.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, so
No, thank you.
We have a question from Miriam, and she asks if you know, where do they use a more experiential system of learning?
What countries?
What countries?
Uh-huh.
Well, the way I understand it, it's most of the Middle East countries. I was told, like in Morocco, I was told about is it okay for me to say it was a church service? Is that okay for me to say? I was told about an example that in the church service, they all sat in a circle and everybody talked. And somebody had visited the United States and they went home and they said, it was really funny in the United States. Somebody stood up front and just told us things. We were not allowed to talk. And so everybody experienced a discussion and they called it church. And here, what do you see? And I mean, maybe in a mosque as well, or a synagogue or something else, it was very different. And that's just one little example. But yeah, students who, I don't know, I hear so many different things. Let's put it that way. But this was one of the things that I've read about. And yeah. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I just know this little research, I don't know where it was from, but apart from Finland, they are doing a lot of experiments where they actually take little kids to a sand pit, and they have them sort of trace a letter with their fingers so they see it and they feel it and they understand where to move and when to sort of stop. So a difference between E versus a C, which I thought was very cool, but it probably works best in a school scenario because they have the whole year. I don't think IEP have that much time, but that's at the level of an experimentation, I feel that's very cool.
It is, and I've heard of kindergarten doing that here too, when they go outside or they bring in a sand pit or this new kinetic sand that they have now, which is cleaner. And
my kids did Montessori school, and that does go all the way up, sometimes, but like in elementary school, they did a ton of that. So I don't know if we can say like this country has this and this the United States doesn't. We do have Montessori. And it's really like teacher by teacher, classroom by classroom.
Yes. Yeah. And dealing with the time too, how much we could get our students actually doing something other than reading an article.
I'd like to say something, if possible, about reading aloud and math. Okay, I work with adult students. I did work with them in person, but I've been online since COVID with them. And one thing I focus on with the students is reading aloud, because reading aloud helps them in so many ways, especially if they're struggling with spelling, because we talked about spelling, pronunciation, because they have some difficulties in pronunciation, like Arabic speakers, for example, usually have difficulty pronouncing the P and the B, and they spend quite a bit of time trying to pronounce the P correctly because they don't have that sound in their language. Also, in terms of pronunciation, like words like asks or attends, so they have difficulty with the S and the K pronunciation, and D and the S, or the T and the S together. So we work on that, and that goes through reading aloud. So I focus a lot on, quite a bit on having them read aloud, because it gives them more confidence in terms of the language, in terms of also speaking and thinking about the language in English. And over the years, I noticed reading aloud has helped the students more than I was expecting, because it just gives them the confidence, the practice in terms of, in all the various language skills. So I'm not sure, like with the beginner students, it may be a larger challenge to get them to read aloud. But once, like, as we say, like they get the hang of it, or they read those simple sentences, I think they gain that confidence of, yeah, I can do it. And then that can translate into the other language skills.
Absolutely. Beginners need to read aloud every day, even repetition and so forth. And there are fun things you can do with that too. I'll have them read aloud on a video sometimes. Like if they're afraid to read out loud in class, I'll have them do it on video for home. And also as a grade, they have to choose a story and then read it. And I have it too, and then give them back. But I absolutely agree with you, Helen. And you're saying you have them read aloud in higher levels too.
Right, yes.
That's cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And I noticed the reluctance. You mentioned resistance in writing. There's also resistance in reading. And it's just amazing. Like, and then I like try to measure how many lines or how many paragraphs can a student read aloud. So for a student who's reluctant to read, I give them fewer lines or a shorter paragraph. And for the ones who are willing to read more, or they have, let's say, the fluency in the reading skill, I give them more to read. And then this way, I'm able to encourage all of them to read, but at the same time, I'm doing that kind of differentiation
Yeah.
on how much they can read in the classroom, on screen, online. So it's quite interesting trying to balance it that
Sure.
way with the students.
That's wonderful, Helen. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And it's also a matter of heart, too. We've got to have heart in our classrooms. We don't want to coddle them, we don't want to kill them. We have to find that place in the middle where we understand there's other things going on. And
Yes,
those things, some of those I've mentioned in here. And
right. Right.
yeah,
And I totally agree with you, Kathy, about math. Math is even a larger challenge for students who, whose language, the students we're talking about, because first of all, show your work. They don't know what that really means. I mean, it was very interesting the way you were talking about how they are required, like they're asked to show their work and they have no idea what that really means, because that's something that they are not required to do. So it's like a foreign concept to them. Also, writing the numbers in Arabic, you think about the numbers in a different way than you think about them in English. So it could take them a minute or two to figure out translating. So there's translation from writing the numbers in math in Arabic, translating them to the way they are written in English. So that creates another barrier for them in terms of trying to figure out the math problems. So they
yeah,
need even more practice in that area, even more practice than just reading aloud. So it's just fascinating how the brain works. And I like the way you describe the left brain and the right brain and both, and how it works in different contexts. That's
yeah.
amazing.
Maybe we need an elective in mathematics. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? I think we're at the end of our time. Oh, we've gone over time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we are at the end. However, there is one more question in the chat that I want to ask you, and I also want to ask a question. For those of you who can't join us beyond 11, thank you so much for coming, and we can't wait to see you at the conference on November 16th. But for those who want to stick around and get a little bit more of Kathy's wisdom, I am going to um, ask this question from Lee. And Miriam asked me to go back to the right brain, left brain slide, so I'll leave that on the screen for her. Okay, so Lee asks, he says, I am an instructional designer, but also a reading captain. Where could I learn how to be better and recognize how to be more assisted with reading aloud, etc., when I am not a professional educator or teacher? I have also done reading stars, but I think it would be helpful information to be aware. Reading at a child versus reading with them is very different. I want to ensure they are learning while being encouraging as well. So what advice do you have?
Wow, that is beautiful. And that part, reading at a child and reading with a child. Wow. Are you talking about, or do you work with children primarily? Is that where your heart is? Is she there? Or he? Who was
Hey, you
it?
can unmute and speak if you'd like.
Yeah. You okay? I am she. Okay, thank you. All right. But you work with children. Yes. Okay. Oh, I see. All right. Well, with working with children, I mean, it's hard. It's a matter of heart. It might be a grandmother that could, or a great grandmother, I should say, grandmother, because I'm grandmother. Um, it might be a great grandmother that could give us all the best advice, and so forth in something like this. But it's a matter of trying to sense what the child is feeling. And I know I get told at different times, well, Kathy, we can't do everything for the person if they have these needs and so forth, because we have to move on. But you're, as an instructional designer, I don't know what I can tell you. How about some other people chiming in on this? I mean, we have to see what the child is feeling. Uh, I remember being back in school a long, long time ago, where we had 15 minutes every day where everybody stopped and read. It was sustained silent reading. And for 15 minutes, the whole school stopped to just read something that was their favorite. And that's something too. Are they interested? Do they want to read a book about something? My grandchild is 4 years old and he's a fantastic reader, not because we taught him, it's because of everything that's available to kids today. But he'll pick out one of the board books, one of the baby books, because he wants to still be his age, or he doesn't want to be this fantastic reader. Everybody who says, "Oh, read for us, Reese," and he doesn't want to. He's still a little kid. So I don't know. I'm sorry I can't give you a better answer on that. Um, Somebody else want to chime in on that? Sounds like you're doing some really good heartfelt teaching, because you're teaching with your heart. You're noticing things. And of course, you're creative. You're on that right side of the brain. Yeah. Anybody else?
And Lee also said, perhaps mistakenly just in a direct message to me, that she loves this session.
Oh, you're sweet.
All right. Can I ask a question?
No. Well, yes, yes. I owe
No.
you. I owe you. You've been such a help.
So, Kathy, I've been waiting to ask this question for over a week now. So,
Uh-oh.
we've talked mostly about beginner learners coming from these dexterosynestral writing systems, but I mostly teach students who are at the upper levels, at the CEFR B2 and C1 level. And I have students who are really proficient, and they still sometimes will reverse their B's and D's and other letters and their S's and C's. And I wonder if you have any advice for working with those upper level learners that want to get that 7 on the IELTS, and this is something that's really holding them back.
Give them a paper that tells them where to start. No, they have to develop their own little strategy. Are they, maybe they like to play soccer or something. Which way do they like to play? Do they, okay, like for me, the B is kicking the ball toward the goal, and I know which way I want to go. Okay, they have to develop their own little strategy. Now I have little indicators of dyslexia. It's in my family, and I've we didn't have people um, like these therapists that I said were at our other school that would go in the classroom, help the teacher, help the student, and things like that. And so everybody had to just do their own thing. and you just got things marked wrong instead of being understood. But at the same time, in your own minds, once students develop a strategy, so ask them to picture something. Maybe they're a right brain thinker. I picture things. I don't see words in my mind. I picture things. And so, which way is he going or she? Am I saying he right? I mean, are these mainly guys?
Most of my Arabic speaking students now are men. And so I don't know that it's more guys than women. It's just that that's who I'm teaching at the moment.
Okay, okay. I mean, I don't want to say the wrong things here, but I might. Um, I've had more guys more recently, but we had a lot more women before, and it seemed like the women, just raising little girls too, like I did, they sit down and they write, and then they might play, and then they might color. But my little grandson, no, let's go outside, mom. I mean, let's throw the football, and literally throw a football, things like that. So it it's how we develop, maybe. And today that's blurred a little bit, but maybe that blur is good.
Yeah, Miriam mentions that there's a nature versus nurture component.
Oh yeah. Thanks, Miriam.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. This was amazing. Kathy,
You use that word too much, Bill.
I knew when I proposed inviting Kathy Bell that we were all really in for a treat, and we truly got one. And so this video will be posted up on YouTube shortly. And so if anyone wants to review it, share it with a colleague, that will be available for you on the PennTESOL East YouTube page, along with all the other Second Saturday seminars that we've had. So again, I hope to see everyone on November 16th at the conference. And thank you so much for your time this morning. And a huge thanks again to Kathy for preparing this presentation and sharing just a little part of everything that she knows about teaching with us. So thank you, Kathy.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Nice to see so many of you.
Glad we
Have
could.
a wonderful day, everyone.